Hi, I'm Deb Caldo, Diageo's Marketing Sustainability Director, and welcome to Diageo's World Water Day Special Edition podcast, where I host a conversation with Ewan Andrew, President, Global Supply and Procurement and Chief Sustainability Officer, and Alan Loredo, Corporate Relations Director, Mexico and Tequila. Taking a virtual trip across the world, they share stories from Mexico, India and South Africa to help us better understand this global issue and its impact on communities and business. We explore how collective action around water stewardship can help build a long-term resilience to water scarcity. Ewan and Alan, it's great to get together today as we celebrate World Water Day 2024. Ewan, I'd love to start with you and some context. Can you tell us why water stewardship is so important?
The statistics that I think about are that only 2.5% of the water on our planet is fresh water. The rest is salt. By 2030, unless nothing changes, we're going to be, globally in 40% more of a water deficit than we are today. And of the 7+ billion people on the planet, 2 billion people, mostly in the south, lack access to clean, fresh water. I think for Diageo, water is vital for us. It's a key ingredient to our product.
Well, I suppose that makes total sense then why, as Diageo, we've set an ambitious goal to replenish more water than we use in all our water-stressed areas and across our tequila production. And we're aiming to do this by 2026. So, Alan, can you give us some insight into what we're doing to preserve water across Mexico and across the tequila category?
Within Mexico, the state of Jalisco, home of the tequila category, home of our distilleries, is a water-stressed area. So to become water positive, that is to replenish more water than the one we use in our operations, is one of our biggest commitments. We announced a $5.5 million investment in Mexico to become water positive. So let me share some examples of how we are putting this investment to work. San Diego de Alejandría is a small town in Jalisco where we built a wastewater wetland to treat all the water that comes from the town center. That is around 270 million liters per year. But about that water that now is being treated is being used by farmers to irrigate their agricultural farms with better water quality and avoiding to extract water from wells. So we are also protecting groundwater recharge, which is very important.
Ewan, according to the World Health Organization and UNICEF, women and girls are responsible for fetching water in 7 out of 10 households that don't have water on premises. This data point, I suppose, leads to a much bigger question, which is, why is water particularly important in addressing gender inequalities?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. You don't stand for equality, and particularly gender equality, unless you stand for water. And let me say why. If I look at the amount of time, as you say, that people have to spend looking for basic resources for life around the world, particularly, like I said earlier, in the global south, then it's traditionally the role of women and girls to go out and go for that fresh water supply. So they are walking huge distances, taking great personal risks in order to help support their families and their communities. So one of the ways that Diageo has been addressing that over many years is the WASH program, so water and sanitation and hygiene, and our partnership with WaterAid in particular, which started in Africa, but now has spread across many of our water-stressed environments where our operations and our communities are. So countries like India, South Africa, across to Mexico, where Alan is as well. And these projects essentially put in place that water and sanitation and hygiene supply directly in the towns and villages. And that means that the women and girls don't need to go any further. They can get access to it right there. The beauty of it is it then starts to drive economic prosperity in the community and a whole set of new opportunities for those women and girls. That's why I started by saying, if you stand for women and girls and gender equality and inclusion in our world, you have to stand for water. Really, that's the whole definition of a sustainable business, operating within the planet's boundaries, helping lift society, and making money in the middle of it so that you can help keep growing our business.
Alan, you've worked for Diageo for a decade now. What are the biggest shifts that you've witnessed when it comes to water preservation?
The first is the fast adoption of nature-based solutions. We are moving from solely depend on the traditional engineering-based approach to a more sustainable, eco-friendly solutions. A good example is wastewater wetland in San Diego, Alejandria. Another shift, I believe that technological innovation is becoming the cornerstone of water stewardship programs. They are incorporating new tools, new methodologies in order to address water scarcity, water pollution, inefficiencies in the tequila category. For example, we are using drones to gather data for the agave plants to take better farming decisions.
Yeah, super clear. Technology is most definitely an enabler, isn't it, of this agenda. Ewan, what's the biggest opportunity when it comes to water stewardship, maybe across the globe?
Clearly, it's about resilience. We've been doing a lot of work over many decades now as Diageo to really be at a pioneering level on water stewardship. And that's meant a big focus in our own operations. Now, we will continue that focus. We've made great strides and improved our water efficiency in those operations up till 2020 by 46% improvement. And we've got targets out to 2030 to be at 30% further improvement and 40% further improvement if you're in a water stressed location. Now, that's fantastic, but there's no point having the most efficient brewery or most efficient distillery in the world if the broader catchment has a problem and a challenge with water. And we've seen that start to show up in many sectors and many businesses already in the world, with the climate and the nature crisis worsening, where the water quality gets so poor that you can't use it, or worse still, even if you process it, if it's not available at all because the river runs dry, then you have a real problem with your operations. You have a real problem with the communities that have relied on the work. My biggest priority is to drive collective action in the priority water basins around the world, where we need to take a leading role. So we've already got programs in 12 water basins. Alan was talking about the great work that's going on in Mexico. They really are leading the way on water replenishment and broadening well beyond our sites. And we're not doing that just as Diageo and with Don Julio and Casamigos Tequila. We need to involve all the other actors and beverage industries and cross sectors to take that collective action. So my role is not just as an advocate, but is actually to make sure that we are across the kind of nature, climate, and people nexus, that we are driving major scale programs of collective action.
In all around the world, we have citizens, NGOs, and companies that are putting new and innovative solutions in order to manage water in a responsible way. And many of these actions are done through collective action. So considering that we have a global footprint, we can use this capability in order to gain knowledge, share best practices from all over the world. I'm a firm believer that our global water stewardship program is one of the best. In tequila, we're leading the category and we're setting high standards. So going forward, I think we have to actively seek and join and lead collective actions.
So such a huge topic, it can be very overwhelming, but how we talk about it and simplify it, I think will help. So Ewan, I know you've got a story on this, which I love hearing.
I want to tell you a story about time I was in an airport with my family, and my daughter took the attention of one of the world's renowned scientists on climate change directly in relation to ice melt. And I felt so educated by how he was speaking to my 7-year-old daughter. So what he explained was, people think that climate change is causing ice to melt at the poles, right? And then that's causing sea levels to rise. He says that's absolutely true. But the bigger impact of the ice melting is not just the flow of that water from a more solid state into the ocean, as fresh water into salt water. He says what's actually happening is that you're losing the weight and the pressure at the poles on the land mass because the ice is melting. So the land starts to rise. That displaces the water and starts to accelerate how much it's rising. Then, because the land is rising, the magnetic forces are changing as well. So you've got less of a strong magnetic force that's pulling that water towards the poles. So then it moves more collectively away from the poles. So when you just think about that as kind of like a 7-year-old kid, getting your head around how the world is changing, it's very simple. And I think we have to do a job as leaders to simplify the corporate jargon, simplify the economic and financial conversations, and just put people into the real world and say, you do these things well, we'll make a difference.
Water can be a key to unlocking climate resilience. So Ewan, I'd love to hear from you how it links across all the other steps we're taking across sustainability.
One great area that all comes together that's really evolving fast across kind of climate, nature, and people is in regenerative agriculture. So what we're seeing more and more is that businesses were looking at how do you work with farmers in order to change many, many years of traditional approaches to agriculture that have become very efficient. And what regenerative agriculture is doing now is it's starting to approach it similar to, as we spoke earlier about collective action. It's actually saying, how do we collectively finance this change? Because no individual business can afford it on its own. But if we start stacking the financing, there's a great program called LENS, which is Land Enterprise Networks, where they pick big catchment areas where there's a lot of farming going on. And it could be crop rotation, where you've got potatoes for food, barley or grain for beverages, flax for fashion. And those companies come in. If you can do regenerative agriculture the right way, you're not releasing the carbon, you're locking carbon into the soil and taking it out of the atmosphere, but you're also stabilizing the water flows. So with cover cropping, hedgerows, introduction of the need for less irrigation because you've got more natural retention, that water is moving through at a slower, more appropriate and more natural rate. And therefore you don't get the big flash rains that suddenly just come through and wash off all of the fertilizers and pollute the waterways. Regenerative agriculture is something I'm super focused on and really excited about, but it takes a lot to get it to accelerate and scale.
And to your point, in Mexico, Don Julio just launched a seminar on regenerative agriculture because we need to start by educating farmers of the importance of this. So we launched a couple of months ago a webinar. We have over 200 agave farmers attending the webinar.
Great. Well, listen, we have covered such an important and huge topic in a very short amount of time and covered lots of ground. But to finish, I'd like to ask you to share what we can all do.
I think baby steps and massive steps. We need a combination of both. I think on the baby steps, I'd say jump on some good websites online and look at your own personal life. The WWF's a great website. They'll show you 10 things to do very quickly in your home life, from don't run the tap to get cold water to drink. Keep cold water in your fridge so that it's available to drink and you're not wasting the water every time to get that cool drink, or take showers instead of baths. All these great things that you can do to preserve the water that you have access to today. We need everybody now to take much bigger steps. Like, I've been out and I've spoken to communities and people who are desperately impacted by these things. And it's not just in countries that are water stressed. I spoke to communities in my home country of Scotland where they've had problems with access to water, or they've had flooding issues, which are regards to kind of just changes people have made to water systems artificially through deforestation or through the lack of control of wildlife that's moving through and causing destruction. We need to fix these things and do it in that collective way. Go and see some of the projects that are making a difference, and that will inspire you to get involved and do that just as an individual, but also as a collective.
Brilliant. Totally agree. Demystifying this whole area, I think, helps create a bit more empowerment. We think of it as a problem that's far away that maybe somebody else is taking care of. The quote, the thing that's going to stop us saving the world is assuming somebody else is already doing it. But I think the way you speak there makes it really much clearer for people to A, understand it, and B, then see their role. And maybe that's about shorter showers. Maybe it's about going into science and, into a generation of new thinkers around water technology at whatever level. Once you demystify it, you know what you're dealing with, you can do something about it. I love the conversation today. Thank you both.